So I've got some credibility. For geophysics, I'm on firmer ground, pun intended. I've walked the equivalent of Land's End to John O'Groats 6 times, pushing and pulling various bits of kit. The eagle eye among you will have noticed that my title is slightly different than the one on your programs. There's a question at the end of the Marriage Maidenhead, which does put a bit of a spin on it. Okay, so without further ado, let us begin. Now this is a plot of Kathy Sturtz's work. I just made it off the walls, actually, this one, Kathy, but I remember I bought that book of yours when you, I think it was Beverly or Driffield, when the first big grand opening was. For the bargain price of £70, which I thought was really expensive back then, but nowadays you can't get it for love and the money. So thanks, Kathy. But this one, I've vectorized this and played around with it a bit. So this is north of Cook's Quarry. So from one honorary member of ARG to another, I worked with Dominic Towson for 20 years, and a lot of this work is going to be some of the stuff I did with him. So this is just north of Cook's Quarry. I want you to remember this line when I show the next couple of slides. That was some of the geophysics we did in the area. Some interpretation of that. So that's just everything. So if we take away the stuff that's not archaeology, we get that. So I'm going to zoom into this area here. There's the AP, the crop mark evidence. There's the geophysics. They're almost mutually exclusive. Crop marks developing here, magnetic anomalies down here, with just a few little overlaps. Now, this one we can actually explain. That's the reason. This is a multispectral data. I'm not going to speak a lot about that. Obviously, we can only see in a narrow vision. And so on the electromagnetic spectrum, you get gamma waves, X-rays, ultraviolet, and beyond what we can see into the infrared, some of which is called thermal. I won't talk too much about that because I know James Bonsall's talking about that tomorrow. But here we have the Yorkshire wolds at the bottom, the Vale of Pickering peat at the top, and in between you have the windblown sand. Showing here, I think that was processed with near infrared and red, and just verging into the thermal bands. So the windblown sand is showing up as yellow. Now, that ladder settlement I just showed you is actually located there, right on the edge between the windblown sand and the peat. So they certainly knew their own area. That was exactly where they chose to put it. You can actually go and stand there and see it. You stand on that boundary when it's plowed. You look one way, it's yellow sand. You look the other way, it's black peat. Or it was until they drained it all. It's now very desiccated. Right, this rather unprepossessing slide is another one of Kathy's. This is up near where I live now, Burton Fleming. That's one I haven't vectorized. It's just a raster that I've put in. But when we did the survey next to it, we discovered there's quite a bit more there. What I want to do today is not be controversial. There's probably most of this you will have heard already. What I want to do is work out why things sometimes work and why they don't. So here, clearly, the magnetics are giving us a lot. There's some interesting thing, Tenemos-like thing up there. Something else interesting about this is social history. This little line you can see there running down here is actually the Gypsy Race, or locally called the Gypsy Race, which is a winter-born stream, a chalk stream. It only runs intermittently. It's also called the Woe Waters, because whenever it runs, bad things are going to happen. And it ran this winter. But interestingly, it used to run there. And the reason it's straight now is because after the Napoleonic Wars, when all the men were coming back, there was nothing for them to do. And so they were put to work straightening the Gypsy Race at that particular point. Right. Just a quick look at different returns from different techniques. So at the top, we have the aerial photography returns. The middle returns are multispectral. This is particularly the thermal band. At the bottom, the radiometer. I did an MSc quite a few years ago now that correlated the returns from all of these things. And so you can look at what you get from each one. And I think that this is what I want you to take away from this, if nothing else. All methods are complementary. No one method will ever give you anything. None of them will give you everything. There's no panacea, no magic bullet. Sometimes it looks magnificent, but bear in mind there's always things you're not seeing. But here in particular, you can see that the multispectral is not really comparing light with light because of the resolution of the data. I don't want to get too much into data resolution, but it was 1.6 to 1.8 meters per pixel. So we're going to miss a lot of the smaller features with that. This was way back in 1992 when this one was done. So, oh yes, that was the other thing I meant to say. It's not just 18 years. The last time I came to an art conference was 1996 in Chester. And it was to show the multispectral data. Back then it was all slides, no PowerPoints, and we had a massive computer and monitor that we had to carry up this little flight of stairs. In this little office, someone saw about 10 people all day. And now you're giving me the graveyard shift straight after lunch again, but I'm not bitter. Just to show what you get, that's a plot, a very simple line plot of some stuff in the Vale of Pippin. Oh, that was the returns from the geophysical survey. If you take a central point from each of those, you get that kind of return. So crop marks 373, geophysical anomalies 10 times, and it would have been more because we didn't actually survey that bit at the top. But we don't always get that level of return. I'm not trying to put all you AP people down. Right, back to Cook's Quarry. This is just to the south of the first slide I showed you. This is, again, Kathy's work. So you've got this type of henge thing up here, maybe a pit alignment, maybe a barrow. Geophysical survey, not really showing very much here. You could argue there's a hint of that henge, nothing about the barrow, linear there. In the 1980s, when Dominic was first digging there, he got Arnold Aspinall to come out with his kit from Bradford. So they did a resistivity survey and a magnetic survey. It was actually in the field next door, over a barrow, and found nothing. So it was believed that the sands were unresponsive to geophysical survey. But we eventually excavated all of that. So as an experiment, when we stripped the topsoil off, we went back and did a high-resolution magnetic survey and got that. So the topsoil is about that deep, 25 to 30 centimeters, but it's acting as a filter to the magnetic signals. We'll see why in a moment. We did do resistivity, that was even worse. We found the modern track in an old field boundary. But back to this, when we excavated it, eventually all of that, that's what was under it. So it's just heaving. But in this instance, neither the crop marks nor the magnetics were giving us what we would have wanted. So it was believed because of this that none of the geophysical techniques were going to work in that sandy zone. This is the zone, so that's the henge that you're looking at, and this is features cutting through it. Note that the henge, which is Neolithic, has a much darker fur. There's a common theme here in the Vale. Later features, the Bronze Age and Iron Age, are filled with this wind-blown sand. But that's why you're not finding them. They are literally filled with sand cut into sand. There's nothing different for the machines to grab hold of. Serendipity. The art of being in the right place at the right time, or just plain luck. Dominic went off to America, to Williamstown, I think, in 1996. He said, why don't you go and try and find that ladder set? And we'll give it one more go. So my wife and I went out with an old FM36 and did 4 grids, because that's what you could do with those. 4 grids, then you can download it, 20-minute download, wait and see what you got. Not very inspiring, it has to be said, apart from that little bit in the bottom. We thought, while we're there, we'll just do another 4, see what we get. So we got that. Now that's looking slightly more interesting. So that turned into that, which turned into that. The arrow showing where the first 4 grids were, which eventually turned into that. So that was where I did most of my Land's End to John O'Groat, so at least 3 of them collected, because it was all handheld data collected. There was no driving carts around back in those days. I'm just going to look now at some specific feature types. This is square barrows. Now, the only crop mark that was in this field was this one here, that little linear. So this is the palimpsest that was spoken about before, but square barrows interest me, because sometimes you find them and sometimes you don't. And there seems to be no rhyme or reason as to why that should be. Here on the sand, the shade, I had a workplace student once, so we went and did this area with the square barrows in high resolution. So you've got quite a nice, this is the type I call the frog spawn type, so they're not all like this. But notice that not all of them have ditches around them. There's quite often just graves buried by themselves without the square barrows, but they're exactly the same time with exactly the same things in them. You find the same grave roots in the ones without the barrows. I often think that things like this look like modern art. That wouldn't be out of place in a gallery. These are the different type of square barrows, the more scattered ones. This was one of the things I was doing for Peter for the 200-year anniversary of the excavation of this site, which is the type site Arras. The Arras culture, the Iron Age, the Parisi. Not Arras in France. Arras because Arras Farm is just up there. So Kathy Sturtz's work and later addition from Google. Now, I might make this plea while I'm here to historic England. Please revisit the Wold. But while I'm at it, what about the Vale of Pickering and the rest of the North York Moors? You're in God's own county and there's big open spaces there. But anyway, so here clearly the crop marks are giving more than we were getting from the magnetic. But the full picture is this. Those were the barrows that were excavated in the 1700s. So neither of them are finding all of them. And that could be a number of reasons. Some of them might be plowed away by now. But just to show you how difficult it was to interpret this stuff, the geology there is a bit of a pig. So you can see some square barrows there, or some floating around up here and a few down there, but these striations make life difficult. So we'll go back in time to round barrows. This one's on the Wolds. No problem finding barrows on the Wolds magnetically. They've all got these lovely ditches. Note, though, that you don't find central grave pits, or almost never. There's a reason for that. The reason is, for an anomaly to work, it's got to be something different in it. When you stick someone in a hole, you dig a hole, put them in it, and then you fill it back in with exactly the same material all over again. After 3 months, you can't find it. You can find it in the first 3 months because of the air pockets. After 3 months, forget it. You're not going to find them. I mean, the forensic archaeologists are forever doing tests, digging pigs into ground and going back to try and find them, because pigs are our analog, apparently. But why were they showing up in the square barrows? Why did we see all of those grave pits in the square barrows? Now, the site that Peter and I dug might have the explanation for that. In square barrows, they often had a box. It's not a coffin, but they would put them in a box, like 2 planks and a plank on top. But the ones we excavated at Numburnham had a layer of clay spread on the top of the box. Now, the clay will be given a different signal. So that might be why we're finding them, not these. So we're going to go up onto the moors now. Clevedike. This is just to the south of Bolby Scar. There's a barrow here, an upstanding one, another upstanding one here, but there's another one in there. You can't see it. That's the scheduled monument. I'll go back. There was no evidence of that one there. The reason we discovered is because on the moors, they don't dig ditches around them. So same time period, but on the Wolds, they're digging ditches around all of the barrows, all the ones we know of. On the moors, they are not. If you go 340 meters to the south, there's another barrow here. You can see the magnetics is working. There's a pit alignment, another ditch, this interesting, probable Neolithic double pit alignment there. But the barrow is not to be seen. So I've just recently been working on another local community volunteer project in the park called Raiding the Bank. So we went and had a look at another one. This one, I'm not going to show a lot of LiDAR, there's plenty of LiDAR coming later today, but it's a faint little bump in the LiDAR. So it's about 25 centimeters high in the field. If you didn't know it was there, you wouldn't notice it. It's just a slight little bump. So we went and did mag there. Surprise, surprise, nothing. I mean, you could make things up if you wanted to, but the reality is that's all geology. This time we did a resistivity survey over there, and so that did actually find it. The reason the resistivity is working here is probably because the low mound is built of rocks. And so the rocks are giving a higher resistance response. Right, nearly finished. Last one. I haven't seen any signs yet. Reached out? Yeah. Is that 5 minutes? Right, okay, and that's fine. This is a site that Peter and I are working on at the moment through money from the whole Maritime Trust Fund. Never shown any crop marks. It's currently a series of horse paddocks. There was an excavation here in the 1970s that found a pair of Roman walls, and then that had to stop. So all backfilled in again then until we went back. So I thought, well, let's try magnetometry on it first. Well, that didn't give us much. The problem with paddocks and gardens and things are that they're full of rubbish. And the electric fences didn't help either. So the reality is there's maybe a line there, maybe a line there. I mean, you really wouldn't want to dig a hole based on those results. So we tried resistivity. Slightly different, with a hint of something there. People got excited by what they were calling the square, this thing here. Now, I was never completely convinced, but we went back and did that again at higher resolution resistivity. So a half-meter resolution. Now, there is a something there. It does look a bit like a square. But just recently, we've had access to a ground-penetrating radar. And so we thought, right, let's try it out here. This seems like a reasonable candidate. Right, now we're talking. I'll just highlight it in case you can't see, but there's I think you can see, there's a number of Roman buildings there. So now we're happy. The thing with radar is you don't just get one view. A bit further down, I've broken it. I didn't even know it could do that. What about my 5 minutes?
I'll press the eject.
Right, so this is at one, that was about 50 to 60 centimeters that you were looking at before. This is at 1 meter. Notice here, we have something different. We have a set of linear walls. These are the remains of walls with some other walls going up at a different angle. We don't know what these linears are yet, but maybe one day we'll go and have a play with this site. This was the one that was excavated in the 1970s. Right, back to my initial premise. Yes, I think it is a marriage made in heaven. As I said earlier, I sort of reiterate that the more things you can throw at a problem, the better chance you're going to get in some resolution. The difficulty with that is cost. These things cost money. It's getting the equipment that most local community groups struggle with, because apart from me, everyone else is doing this for nothing. That whole radar survey has been done by Bob. It's taken 9 days so far to get that, because you have to walk up every 25 centimeters that way and then do it that way as well. So very time consuming, but a good result. The reason the question mark there is because here in Britain, we have to work a lot with commercial units. We've got to put tenders in. So they will normally not want us to do resistivity and magnetometry. Well, no, just do the magnetometry. And then you get complaints when they dug a hole and they say, well, you didn't say there was anything there. And then you're trying to explain to them, well, actually, because it's not magnetically different. So that's why the question mark is here. So yes, marriage made in heaven, but divorce falls just around the corner. Thank you.